This is an incredible conversation, but it's a full-on one. There's discussions of trauma, including sexual assault and suicide. I just want to warn people that if they're not feeling up to it at the moment, then perhaps skip this one for now and come back when you feel ready. But I really encourage you to come back and have a listen, as this is a conversation and a story worth hearing.
But I think one of the childhood challenges that I struggle with is oh my God, I think it's like the neglect. It's the being left alone and having to be self-sufficient.
The Imperfects invites you into a very safe place. A place where we share without judgment and drink heaps of vulnerability. Grab yourself a cup. This is the Vulnerabilitea House.
Sure is. It sure is, as always. And we got a good pot of tea brewing for today. This is exciting here.
It
Josh.
is.
Very
Brooke.
exciting.
Hello.
Hello. Hugh. Hugh's the bio guy.
Yeah.
He reads the bios.
Yeah.
Well, all I wanted to say on the introduction to Brooke was I think most people probably know Brooke from The Bachelor and then Bachelor in Paradise and then The Bachelorette.
Mm.
But there is so much more to you. That's just like such a small little snippet of your life that is probably not even totally real life. But there is so much more to you. I mean, I look at you and I think, knowing your story, I think you are a picture of resilience. You are a picture of hope. And it is, I mean, for someone who's worked in resilience for the last 15 years, I feel so honoured to be sitting at the same table as you. And we are so excited that you're here today.
Already with the feels. I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you. I mean, it is such a pleasure. And I mean, I've learned so much about you and, you know, learned so much from you as well, Hugh. And all of you, actually. I do listen to the pod. So, yeah, it's a huge honour to be here and thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I mean what I said, because I think when I really started to understand you more as a person, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, I mean, your story is extraordinary. And I do think most people would go, oh yeah, Bachelor, Bachelorette. But there is
Bachelor in Paradise.
Bachelor in Paradise.
Yeah. Why would you leave that one off? It's great.
I don't know.
I don't really count it as well. So
Oh, really?
it's fine.
Okay.
Brooke and I don't count it, mate. So
Yeah.
Neither. Edit point, neither.
I don't know. I was there for a week and I was like, nah, not for me.
Okay.
But, you know, actually that sort of does, you know, play into my story and I guess how it was all sort of set up in a way to then lead into The Bachelorette, obviously, you know. But, yeah, 2018 was the first year that Australia got to meet me in some weird way. Had no interest in TV or media or The Bachelor.
Oh, really? You had no... Wow.
No, I always say that I never went into TV or any of the shows for entertainment. Like, you know, that's what sort of these shows are about, right? Entertainment.
And love.
Yes. That's entertainment.
Sure.
If you're terrible at it,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I am, obviously. So,
She's perfect.
yeah, fits right in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never went into the show with an interest of, you know, being something or making something from it. In a way, I was working in youth work and still do to this day. Love my job, but I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for education rather than entertainment. So, yeah, that's kind of always been my mentality around any of the shows that I've done.
Wow.
It's been about educating people or sort of changing the narrative that people have and the perception that I have on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I was one of the first ever contestants to go on the show. And then obviously leading into the first ever First Nations bisexual Bachelorette.
Was it an exciting call when they called you and go like, we'd like you to be the Bachelorette?
Yes, but I was absolutely shitting myself because I was like, I was thinking Australia's not ready for something like this, like format wise. Like I was like, they're going to absolutely like obliterate me. Like I'm going to be a laughing.
For what reason?
Because I had fears, and one of my biggest fears is feeling embarrassed. Like I get really upset about being embarrassed and feeling like, someone's intentionally, like not that there are people out there that do that, but there are as well. But
reality TV is a very safe space for that. So yeah.
Exactly, it happens. And I don't know if you guys remember or if you ever came across a show called A Shot at Love with Tila Tequila.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I watched it.
She was probably one of the one of the most prominent bisexual people. And I never really identified with the label like bisexual. Like I was always like Brooke, and I, had girlfriends and I had boyfriends. Like that was it. Like all my footy girls that I went and played footy with all knew that I was queer or whatever. And we just never talked about it. Like we didn't need to. Like it was just, it is what it is. Like no one cares. And yeah, so being labelled bisexual was quite conflicting for me because I was like, well, I've never really identified with this title, but I want to show queer love, and I want to like show that, love is love, whether it's with a man, whether it's with a woman, whether it's with anyone. So being the first bisexual bachelorette is always like really like conflicting sometimes to identify with. I'd say I'm really proud to be the first First Nations bachelorette because one, it was shot on my country and it was shot with such integrity to show that, that beautiful side of me, and I love that. And not saying the queer side is not beautiful, but I just like the sexuality doesn't matter to me. Yeah.
Well, you say it was about a lot for you was about education. That series opened with a Welcome to Country, a really moving Welcome to Country. That's all part of that, I reckon. Like the just introducing to a lot of Australians your culture. What was that Welcome to Country like? Did it came across? That was a beautiful moment. Did it? Well, I don't know if that's the way it was edited, but in that moment, did it?
No, the way that it shows is honestly the way that I remember it. It was phenomenal. But that Welcome to Country, it was something that I enforced. Like I was like, this is what I want. And they took that and they made that, and they were so careful with it, which I think is probably one of the best things that, my experience with production over the years is one of the things that I'm most grateful for. Is that they didn't, I had a First Nations consultant and a First Nations advisor helping me, making sure that, I was respectful of where I was and where we were filming. And they went through the whole team and, taught them how to, just to be respectful, but also like conscious of like language used. And, we smoked the houses out that we all lived in. And then I had also an inclusivity advisor as well, who was making sure that everyone used like inclusive language, which has never been done before on these shows. Like the way that we were spoken to on my first season to the way that I was spoken to as a bachelorette is completely different, and it's really sad. But that Welcome to Country meant so much to me, and to stand there with Osha, who I know is one of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life and has so much strength, but him being able to hold that space for me and then have these uncles playing the didgeridoo as I come out of the limo and just be like, it's okay. Like you can just be Brooke. Like you don't have to worry about whether this is going to be a kerfuffle. Like that was a nice way of saying it, but
great word to use.
Yeah,
not used enough.
I've got to get creative with youth work because you can't swear.
Yeah, so you roll out that a lot.
Yeah,
you are like such a kerfuffle.
Sugar
Coded,
sugar nice tea,
Oh,
sugar
wow.
iced tea.
So okay, so
Yeah, so it also woke Australia up a little bit about, which land and whose land you are on. So my friend Amy was in my last episode of the show, and she basically questioned the last two people that I was going to pick on who, like, where is Brooke from? And they couldn't tell her where I was from, like what tribe what nationality, like what land they're on as well, like what they work and live in. I think that was also an eye opener for a lot of the audience watching, and people being like, yeah, shit, this is First Nations country and I don't even know where I am, which I feel very proud of.
That's amazing, yeah.
How many bachelorettes have said that they've been able to like have those conversations? Probably not many. I mean, now I've seen a lot of the shows are showing an acknowledgement and a welcome at the start of the show. I know this is totally off topic, but I don't know if you've ever watched it, but F-Boy Island.
I haven't never watched it, but I know the show.
Yeah, the show, the premise is crazy, whatever. But but like even to that level, like they're showing an acknowledgement, like, and it's like I'm like, okay, I love that there's like respect, but I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So like, I've changed the game, okay?
Absolutely. What an impact on F-Boy Island.
Yeah. No, I just mean as in I've always been about changing the narrative, and I think from a young girl to now I'm still continuing that, and I probably will always try to change the way that people think about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and the perceptions that they have of us. I think it's really valuable in this day and age now, especially moving into, what we're about to go into with the referendum.
Now might be a good time to talk about that. The referendum is up in a few weeks. I'd love to hear your take on your vote.
Yes. This is a very emotional time, and I think a very crucial time at the moment. We're going into having a referendum, and I think the last referendum that we had in 1967 with giving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people rights, like making, they actually are human. Before that, we were flora and fauna. Is huge because, I mean, if you look at the success of previous referendums, there's probably, 44. We've had 8 successful ones. So it's like, it's quite scary. I think there's so much misinformation and so much stuff out there. I think a lot of people can get really confused. Like you throw, constitution, law reform, you throw those words out, people immediately like, oh, that's not that realm. Like, I don't know. And I think we just need to simplify it, and I think people need to do the work and research and education around it. And I think also people need to sit down with more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and talk about what this referendum means. I'm a yes vote because I've been part of the youth dialogue. I've been part of the campaigning for the voice since 2019. I'm just going to tell you a story and then hopefully you can kind of gauge, because we're storytellers by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Like we're storytellers, and we, history wasn't written a lot about us, and it was all shared orally and listened to deeply. And my nana was born in 1940, and the referendum happened in 1967, and she was 27. I'm 28. So for the basically majority of her life, she wasn't classified as a person. And that was based off British colonial people making those decisions. And so basically the majority of my nan's life, up until she was my age, she wasn't classified as a person. So therefore she wasn't even able to receive an education. She was unable to receive or even go and get a job. She worked for a white family, making beds for that family, making dinner for that family. And I just think back to that time, which is not that long ago, just my grandmother, which is my mum's mum. It's just been such a ripple effect, and it's still so prominent now, and I don't want that for my children. And I don't want to rely or to let these politicians or these people, the government per se, continually make decisions on behalf of us, thinking that they know and understand our traditions, our culture, our songlines. It's just, it's had such an impact on my life, such a direct impact on my life. And people say that it doesn't exist. It's the statistics tell us exists. Like people will say that, child removal isn't a thing anymore. We have the highest rate of child removal, like this day and age. This referendum is such an emotional one because obviously the polling at the moment is leading to a no vote. And I think we just need to keep helping people understand why this is like so necessary for not just for Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, but just for our nation, like what that means.
I find that as a non-Aboriginal person, I want to talk about it more, but I don't feel like I can. I feel like there's a fear of saying the wrong thing, or because the wrong thing has been done and said so many times. I'm sure we might get into this when we do get to the cards, but I'm sure you've experienced racism throughout your life, and as a non-Aboriginal person, you're privy to it. It's not directed at you, but you hear things said. And I've heard in the past this sort of concept of you can't let Aboriginal people won't know what they want. You can't get a unified voice out of them and all this kind of stuff that's blatantly kind of disruptive and offensive and disgusting. What I find most personally appalling is that the Uluru Statement from the Heart, from what I can see, seems to be one of the most beautiful olive branches and a coming together that non-Aboriginal Australia wouldn't be able to pull off. And it's a simple request to begin, and as I saw Paul Kelly wrote so beautifully, it's taking in a breath of fresh air. And then to ask this of Aboriginal people, they do it, and then to say, all right, you've done it, but no.
Yeah, Malcolm Turnbull turned it down. So this was proposed, the statement was proposed a couple of years before this is all sort of unravelled, and he just looked at it and just said no. 12 years we've been pushing for this, the voice, particularly based around the statement. And then there's one part of the statement that I love. And it's like, when our youth have power of their destiny, they will learn to walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift, or their gift will be their
Culture will be the gift. Yeah.
And I especially use that a lot because I think of the young people, because I know what it's like to walk in two worlds. My dad is British. So the thing is with my life, it's just like such a walking contradiction sometimes. But my mum's Aboriginal Malaysian and my dad is British. And my mum and dad were both the abused and both the abuser. So I don't have any hate or malice against white people. It's a part of my identity that I acknowledge, and I'm just trying to make Australia a better place for my future children so they don't have to experience having to walk in two worlds, so they can just walk in one world and just be like, well, this is just who I am, this is our nation, and I'm very proud of that. Whereas I can't technically feel very proud of being Australian per se. It's because this doesn't feel like a united country. This doesn't feel like a country that I want my children to be in sometimes, because the history that I hold on to, the intergenerational trauma, the racism that I've had to experience and my mum has had to experience. I was brought up in community, and so all I know is to respect one another and to treat everyone with kindness and dignity and respect and care and consideration, like whether they're black, white, whatever, wherever they come from. I just don't think as Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, we've ever been treated with the right dignity and the right respect that we so deserve. And I think people forget that this is Aboriginal land, and it always was and it always will be. But when we don't even acknowledge that, as a nation, like how can we even move forward? Like it's really hard because I've always walked in two worlds. I think I joke that I walk in four worlds because I have to navigate social media as one and my sexual identity as another. So that's
The worlds are piling up.
yeah. Yeah. The referendum chat is a very, very difficult one to have. But I just really, really encourage, non-Aboriginal people to have conversations. Like, don't be afraid to just have a yarn, just ask, there's no dumb question. Like, if just maybe flip the narrative, and if this was something for your family, what would you want other people to know about it? And I think, what would you want? It's hard to feel like 28 and feel like it's the gravity of all this. Like, it's just like, holy shit. This is like a triggering time for a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, because in 1967, when we first had that, not first, but we've had many referendums, but that referendum was quite a significant time. So it feels like you're reliving. At the end of the day, we only make up 3.3% of the population. And so that's, majority of Aboriginal people are voting yes. There's only a slight no, I think. And those voices are quite loud. But we can't carry that all on our own. Like, we actually need the Australian nation to kind of walk beside us.
I know, of course, I understand that it's like a really complicated discussion, and there's obviously lots to consider.
Yeah.
But do you feel like is it frustrating to you, or frustrating is probably it's probably a bigger word than that, but
Kerfuffle?
It is a kerfuffle.
The fact that is there a part of you that thinks this is actually not complicated at all? This is actually really simple. It's really, because there is a way to look at it where it's just like, you just sort of put it so well when you think about it as your family. There's a real empathy side to this that is so human, and I think in its most simple form, this is like a human empathy thing.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of the feelings that a lot of feelings that we have, is that we weren't treated as humans for a very long time. And I don't have, I was born in 95, so I feel like so lucky to have all this privilege in some degree. I say privilege in quotation because I definitely didn't have any type of privilege growing up. But my grandmother wasn't treated as a human. And it does feel simple. Like, it feels like just look at it from a lens of like empathy and kindness and acceptance, and also like it's not a solution, it's just a start. It's got a lot more than some symbolism behind it. Like people who are saying yes, like we're saying we acknowledge you, like we want this for you and we want this for our nation. But I think there's just like so many loud voices that are pushing the no. And saying no doesn't mean that you're racist. I have friends and people that are also pushing the no because they want more. I don't want to put this trust in our nation to make this decision on behalf of us again. But, if we can just get it over the line, I think we'll, be a start. Sorry, it's weird.
No.
I don't know if I'm describing it the best way, but.
Well, I think all you can do is speak from the heart and speak from your perspective.
It's just such an emotional one. I think it just brings up so much stuff for people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
understandably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan's saying in its most simplest form, it is asking for a voice to Parliament. Like, that's I feel like we would look back in many years, a bit like you look back on your grandma saying, can you believe that that's the way she was treated? Hopefully in years to come, we look back and go, can you believe, like Brooke, you're saying to your kids, can you believe when I was your age, there was no voice to Parliament? Like, hopefully that's that outrageous in years to come. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
it's like marriage, the marriage law bill being passed. Like, we look at that and we're like, oh, great.
Of course.
Like
Yeah.
that just makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Like why? I mean, I'm learning a lot about the marriage law at the moment, but yeah, it's like it just seemed so silly that we would say no to something like that. That people couldn't just get married. Just you know what I mean?
It does seem wild.
Yeah, I was watching the Yes campaign ad that just came out
With the
a few days
voice.
ago. Yeah, which I love. And there was the scene where they had the plebiscite, and I was really, it was like I hadn't thought about it in a while. I'm like, I can't believe it's nuts that I can't believe that was not a thing, like that gay marriage wasn't legal. It's it's amazing how quickly as you're saying, the sort of public conscious of what is normal and acceptable changes, and it just feels like this is the next step we need to get across to have to be decent. I don't know, just to be a decent.
Not to run
nation.
Parliament, not to make all decisions, but to have a voice.
It's a pretty fucking simple
Yeah.
thing that'll make us a more decent country to be a part of.
Thank you so much for your
That's okay.
for your voice on The Voice. It's really lovely to hear you talk about it.
Thank you. I do, don't come from I always say that I don't come from a political stance, but inherently, being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, having that heritage, you are deemed sort of political and you have to have a standpoint and opinion. So yeah, I can only really come from an emotional point of view sometimes because I'm just an extremely emotional person because my family and my community means so much to me. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm not one to talk law reform or constitution, like it's on the back of my hand. But if you talk to justice and you talk to respect and I think you talk to acknowledgement, then yeah, I'm probably one to know what's the right thing to do in that sense.
Beautifully said.
I think everyone is probably getting a picture of there's a lot more to you than just Bachelor, Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise,
Yeah,
as well, included. So now might be a good time to do the cards and see what card you draw, and that might give insight into who you are outside of Channel 10.
Thanks.
Have I got the right channel? I have.
Yeah, you
Yes.
do.
Okay.
Yeah. I forgot as well.
So Brooke, as you might know, this deck of cards here. So you got the top three cards. If any of those three speak to you, then please choose one, and it might evoke some form of vulnerability. But if you just want to read each of them out and
Choose one.
choose one.
Okay, so the first question I've put, the first one is, what fear would you like to be free of? Which I think is good, which is everything.
No fear would be great, thanks.
Thanks. What childhood challenges best prepared you for adulthood? Which I definitely love that question. And what are you struggling with right now? Again, everything. So yeah, what childhood challenges best prepared you for adulthood?
Okay.
I mean, where do you start with this one?
For some reason, I was thinking it could be like a chronological thing, like if things happen in stages throughout your life that it's almost like, you're saying before, Indigenous people are great storytellers. Like, to me, this, as soon as you said, I was like, well, I'd love to hear the story of your childhood, I guess, because a lot has got you to the point where you appear on The Bachelor. There's a lot that has happened in your life. Maybe that's a good way of doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, let's definitely go chronological. I mean, there's not, in my 28 years of life, I've experienced quite a bit. I think a lot more than the average human. But I don't think that I would change any of that. I think for me, it has best prepared me for my adulthood and my life because I think I'm more compassionate and more considerate. I think I have built such a resilience to a lot of things in my life, which I think our young people really struggle with now. And I think, I have empathy towards any person who is sitting in front of me. I don't have any type of judgment or perception of people. I mean, I was always taught to stick up for the little guy. My mum was one to, have these little hidden messages. And I would talk to my mum a little bit about it because I think I'm not anywhere where I would be now if it wasn't for her. Yeah, she said always stick up for the little guy, and I don't think the little guy is necessarily the smallest in the room. I think it's the person without a voice. I always get so emotional about this. So.
It's totally fair enough.
So, yeah, I think majority, so up until I was about 11 years old, I grew up in community until my mum and my grandmother died within a month of one another.
How old were you?
11.
11.
Wow.
And so you're losing two of the most influential women at that time, and, you've only ever known community, and a lot has happened in that 11 years. Like my brothers and I would remove back and forth from our home and put into foster homes and child protection. And, I talk about this a lot in my memoir, Big Love, about, living in a house that was living in poverty and not having access to food, growing up and seeing things that you shouldn't see at that age. And I don't blame my mum, or I don't sort of blame how I was brought up. I just think like this was the ripple effect that I spoke to about intergenerational trauma, and it ripples into my daily life and my life now. But in saying that, I think my childhood challenges of losing loved ones has definitely made me super resilient to death and loss. Makes me appreciate people when they're on this earth. And I think, I'm super considerate in the way that I think, whether that's telling someone I love them literally every single day, even if I've just met them. I'm a hugger. I'm a person who loves, affection, and because of those reasons. And so I feel like that, I love that about me. But I think one of the childhood challenges that I struggle with is oh my God, I think it's like the neglect. It's the being left alone and having to be self-sufficient, which in hindsight I'm obviously not that ungrateful for, because it's taught me to be so independent and be so reliant on myself. But it always just makes me a little bit sad for that younger self, because no one should really feel that alone.
How old are we talking when you look back and think about the stage of neglect? Is this before the passing of your grandmother and your mum, or is this after it all? Yeah, sorry, do you want tissues?
Tissue? Yeah.
Flooding. Oh, God. See, I told you. I told you it was coming.
You weren't.
Gave you warning.
Yeah.
I tried to even wear waterproof mascara, but it's definitely not going to work, is it? So, yeah, I'd say it's that neglect. I think the feelings of, there'd be times when I had to get up in the morning and I'd be like having to get a chair and make porridge on the stove. And, I'd have to do that and dish that out to my two younger brothers, who were just like 3 and 8 at the time. And there'll be moments, when we went to school and we didn't have lunch, and I was starving and so hungry that, I used to kind of sneak out at lunchtime and just see if there was anything that I could eat. So these are the childhood experiences that have just like completely and utterly shaped the way that I think and motivate me, really, because I don't want anyone to experience that ever. And I know there are people that will, but I feel like in my life, like I don't want any young person to feel like they don't belong, or are neglected or left behind.
So when you lose your grandma and then your mum,
yeah,
who did you think was the safe adult in your life at that point?
from a very early, like from a young age, I was just pretty self-sufficient as well. Like my family used to joke about, you know, if I tipped my bottle over, I'd run into the kitchen and grab a tea towel and like wipe it up. And this is like when I was like 3 or 4. Like I was just always such a self-sufficient kid. And I think then that sort of responsibility carried out all of living in community for me. Like I had to look after my younger siblings as young as 8. And then when my mum and my nan passed away, I actually moved away and I came to Perth, and I lived with my dad, who is British, and he was, you know, and I didn't even live with him because he was also not equipped to look after me.
And so you're separated from your
siblings.
Your siblings at that point, yeah.
Yeah. So what really had happened in a more in-depth form, I think, to explain, is that it was my mum and my nan were inseparable. So when I talk about my mum, my nan's not too far, like where they were just so in sync. Like, yeah, completely. My mum is my nana's youngest child, and so she was the one that used to take care of my nan. And so it was my nan, my mum, me, my older brother, my other 2 younger brothers, and my uncle, all living in like a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, like Homes West house, which is housing commission housing. And we made do. I mean, it wasn't the best, but we made do with what we had. And I think that's also made me realize like to make a little go a long way. And I think that's one of the things I really love as well, is that frugality. Sorry. It's one of my words that's like instilled in my head. It's like, you know.
Did you just do like a Ridgy Didge sign when you said frugality?
It's my way of dealing. Sorry.
Brooke Blurton's making frugality cool again.
Yes, guys. Yeah, I mean, I joke about it, but it's like, so what happened, my nan was getting really sick and I was also taking care of her, having to dish out her medication. And she actually had a stroke in our backyard, watering her garden, which was one of her favourite things to do. And I was the one that noticed and called the ambulance, and I was only 11 at the time. Nan went in the ambulance, and I remember like half of her face was, because when you have a stroke, basically the left side of your face is drooping, and she was non-responsive. And so I went and got an adult because there was no other adult in the house down the road. And basically the ambulance was there by the time I got back. And so we went and visited my nan. She was basically transferred from our community down to a hospital, and we said our goodbyes because we basically got told that she wasn't going to recover. And my nan and I were super close. So she was the one that like taught me how to make porridge, taught me how to look after the garden, make a bed, because that was probably one of the only skills and things she could really remember from working for this family. And so we were super close, and I, in her like later, before she got sick, like, you know, spend time with her listening and making sure that I deeply listened to her stories. And then, so she was in hospital, and so we came down and visited my nan, and came back up to Carnarvon, and then my mum came down by herself. And it was really unusual for my mum to travel by herself. Usually she would take either one of us or her partner. And it was just a very unusual, you know, for her, it was just unusual to want to come down to Perth by herself. And my mum was not in a really good way. She was really struggling with like her mental health. And at that time, I didn't know anything about mental health. I just knew that she used to isolate herself in her room, and we wouldn't see her for days. Or she would be quite erratic and quite impulsive. But, yeah, there was a lot going on. And so my mum came down to Perth, and she never came back. So I think one of the biggest regrets that I have is speaking to my mum when she left to go to Perth, was that I wanted to come with her because I obviously was so close to my nan and I didn't want to let go of nan. And so I was begging her to come and stay with her. And then, sorry, it's just
You're doing extremely well, by the way. Extremely well.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Mm.
But I feel very safe in this. So thank you. Yeah, and basically my mum never came back. So we lost my mum before we lost my nan. So my mum, she basically she took her own life. It was really hard because, I don't know if I have really faced that yet. Yeah, it's hard to talk about it. But
I can't even imagine. It's so hard to even think about an 11-year-old Brooke.
Yeah.
Trying to just understanding that now is almost impossible for us. I don't understand how an 11-year-old not just
Sorry.
I find it hard to understand. It's just so heartbreaking to picture an 11-year-old trying to work through that and deal with that loss.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for my 11-year-old self in so many ways. I think I always, when I'm really struggling with work stress or something big, I always think, wow, well, that girl got through that. So you can get through this, and I kind of push myself all the time.
You must feel so proud of your 11-year-old self. I cannot even imagine, like you said, it's unless you go through that, of course you can't imagine it. But then, like you just say, to be able to look at yourself as a different person when you were younger as as a source of strength.
Yeah, because there's no denying that was probably one of the hardest moments of my life, losing. And it goes so much deeper than that. And I think I write about it, so I feel like I've lived it, and I have also kind of learnt from it. I think when I wrote it all out, and I was like, wow, holy shit! So my mum died, and then we waited quite a while to get her body back for the funeral, which also then you can sort of start the grieving process. And then we had my mum's funeral and we had the wake at our house, which is we gather, we have a big bonfire. We, most of the adults sort of, get together and drink piss. That's it. And most of the kids just gather in the room and sort of watch a movie together. So that night, unfortunately, I was sexually assaulted. And so at my mum's wake, which was probably one of the most terrifying, and traumatic days of my life, someone, I don't hold a lot of anger or frustration towards something like that. I think is just something that had happened, and it's okay, how do I as a person deal with something like that, just like all the other things that I've dealt with. So I mean, I don't really, I'm not one to really talk about it a lot. Hard to talk about. Sorry. It's
It's just unthinkable.
Yeah. I had a really, really special lady who came into my life. Her name was Imogen, and she talked about, this particular issue that happens a lot in community. And for me, it kind of gave me so much power to not let it define me and to not let it, consume me in a way that, I allowed it to. I think I've taken that experience and it's happened, but I think it's the other stuff that also is the layers that, who the fuck takes advantage of someone like that in a situation? I don't know, and I don't think I would never. So
going from the last time I spoke, I said I can't imagine an 11-year-old Brooke going through that loss, but to have that trauma piled on top at a time that was so important and so pivotal to your development, how you mourn your mother's loss, have that moment taken away from you by something so horrific. I said at the top, you're the most resilient person I've ever met, and I'm going to say you'll never be surpassed. That title is yours forever.
Not a competition, but
I will take it. I'm competitive. That experience definitely changed me, and I think that, again, the layers of that, that time is so complex. But I actually shut down. I think as an 11-year-old self, I take a lot of pride from her, and I think, wow, holy shit, you went through that. But it wasn't without reflection, and it wasn't like, am I going to let these experiences define me, or am I going to, take control of of my life? And
you were saying that to yourself as an 11-year-old?
I wish.
Like,
I went mute.
okay.
So for a year, I didn't talk. Actually, for nearly 2 years. Which is kind of funny because now I get paid to talk sometimes.
To make up for lost time. Was that a conscious thing back then? Did you think I'm not going to talk, or did you just don't? You just didn't want to, and you just kept not talking?
Well, as you can imagine, then moving away, and so that was the defining moment. I think when I called my dad out of an old phone book. I don't remember. Obviously you remember phone books back in the day. And found my dad's name. Well, actually found my stepmom's name, and I called the phone book and I moved. Basically, I didn't even say what had happened. I just called and said, you need to come get me. And my dad drove up and picked me up and it's a 9-hour drive. So it was quite a while of waiting and, anticipation. And
if you had not have called him, what would have happened? What's the protocol there?
Yeah, well, it was myself, my younger brother who was 8, and then my baby brother who was 3 when my mum died. And we were in the house by ourselves. So other than the wake where everyone was at our house, we were living basically in the house by ourselves. We had no adult looking after us other than our neighbours, which was like an aunt / nan, but they weren't our guardians. They weren't taking control of what was happening to us. And so if I hadn't called my dad, I don't know if I would even be here. I don't even know if my life would have played out the way that it played out. I think I would have stayed in Carnarvon. Don't know what I would have done or who I would have been, but it was really hard leaving my town behind because it's all that I had known, and leaving my brothers behind was the biggest and the hardest thing as well because we were so close, and we're so much closer now, but one of my brothers had said to me later in life, he's like, I really still struggle with that abandonment. And I was like, but you couldn't put that responsibility on me. I was only 11.
Yeah, you just.
But my brothers just looked to me for guidance. Like they looked to me to like protect them and take care of them. And I still do, obviously, to this day. But at that time, I was only a kid and I could only do what I could with the best that I had. Like I had no idea what to do. I had to make that decision, and it was probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life to move away from my family, but probably the best thing, and it probably saved my life, if I'm being honest.
Well, you weren't safe where you were as well, and you can't explain that to your brothers as an 11-year-old. To an 8 and a 3-year-old. You can't explain that.
No.
You don't want them to know that stuff. So
no, my it was really hard later in life to actually talk about that to, about the book, because obviously my brothers read the book and they had never known that experience to ever play out. And
gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, as an 11-year-old, you're like making these huge life decisions and but I think, to be fair, I was actually only ever in survival mode. Like I was just trying to survive. Like I was like, I don't even think I ate or, spoke for like a week, and then it turned into 2 weeks, and then it turned into months. I did eat eventually, sorry, but the speaking definitely didn't. And I went mute for maybe, a year and a half, 2 years, where I would only speak if someone spoke to me. And so it helped me, I think, and that's just like a trauma response, obviously. Yeah. Through the many psychology sessions that I've been through, that's a normal response apparently to trauma in some degree, but not for that long. But to come out of it, and I think to find my confidence and to find my voice again was a journey. My dad absolutely hated me he didn't feel we couldn't build a relationship because I never spoke. So I was then blamed.
But he knew everything that had happened?
No.
Mm-hmm. So from his point of view, he got a call from you and didn't know why, and you obviously didn't tell him.
He knew that my mum had passed. Mm-hmm. So my dad knew my mum had passed because, he got notified, when it all sort of happened. But it was like 2 weeks until we actually had the funeral. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even him that was like, you need to go get her. It was actually my stepmom. Mm-hmm. Because she was just thinking like this poor young girl is like in this community. She doesn't have her mum. Mm. And she's amazing. I do love my stepmom, but her relationship is very complex in itself. Mm. But I
hope this isn't an inappropriate question to ask, but is your dad, is he also the dad of your of your brothers?
No. So okay. My 5 siblings that my mum, the 5 children my mum had, all of us actually have different dads. Okay. Yeah. So they're like half brothers, but in my culture we just brother and sister. Yeah. But we're super close. I mean, my brothers and my dad, my stepmom, sorry, had no idea what happened. I eventually told my stepmom because, like a physical aspect, like, a response to something like that happening is that you might get your period earlier than expected. So, yeah, that sort of stuff kind of unraveled. And so, yeah, the 2 years that I was mute, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was. I was kind of like, it was like this out-of-body experience for me. And I was at high school and I was just really struggling to adapt to a lifestyle, to a life that I didn't understand. Like I didn't really make any friends. I didn't really go out of the house. Like I was just, And then so when I started playing footy, that was like the only thing that I could connect back to home, which is so weird. But because I was playing footy back home in Carnarvon, I felt like I was doing something that was like normal again.
Yeah.
And I could like just do it and not think.
How did that, and is that, I was going to ask the question of when you started to find your voice again, was that linked with footy or? And how did you make that step from, because that sounds like a monumental moment to be, I don't know what the word is, but working through all the shit you had to work through to then going to how did it happen? How did
I get to footy?
I just think it feels like such a huge step.
I mean, I was always like a very polite kid, and I think my teachers could, because I went straight into year 7, which was not high school at that age, and I was good at athletics, and so, I was more focused on sport in that last bit of year 7 that I had. It was only like a term, and I'm sort of, everyone was like, "Oh, you're so good at athletics." Yeah. I hate saying I'm good at something because it makes me feel uncomfortable. Like I don't want to but I was like
she's very
really
arrogant.
Yeah, very arrogant.
The one thing I'll remember from today.
As soon as Brooke walked in today, she's like, we're going to talk about my athletic skills, aren't we? You were very clear on that.
Let's get our times out.
The contract.
Yeah.
What events were you good at, out of interest?
Running, so sprints, and randomly discus.
Oh.
So unusual. I know. Yeah, I know. Started off as athletics, and then when I moved to high school, my high school had a specialist AFL program, and I had a really good teacher, and his name was Jeremy Bruce, and I owe him so much because fast forward, and then I'll rewind back. Yeah. But fast forward when I started working in youth work and back in the area that I went to high school in, him and I were colleagues. Like we worked together. That's how much we're so connected. And he was just like a really, like a dad figure person. Like he took me in and he knew that I was shy and that I didn't really speak, but he'd always give me like a new nickname every week. I couldn't even tell you, they were so stupid, but that relationship with the teacher, that that guidance, and sort of he knew that I had quite a tough upbringing. He just kind of like, I don't know, fostered that relationship and sort of like.
It was an adult you could trust.
Yeah, it's probably one of the very first male adults that I could trust in a very long time. Obviously, my dad was around, but he wasn't the greatest role model, if I'm being honest. So Jeremy Bruce, he was just fun and like inviting and, just every day he was just consistent and never changed, the way that he was. And so it slowly over time throughout my footy, he kind of valued how much I love footy as well. Like, he was an Eagles supporter, I was an Eagles supporter, just like stupid shit. Like, I don't know, stupid little things. And then I think eventually I started coming more out of my shell as I started to make friends and started to believe in myself and, getting selected into like state footy things. And
my God, you are so arrogant.
Get her, Hugh.
Someone say state.
To lay the boot in, Hugh.
Yeah.
I'm joking, obviously. That's awesome. So you're playing for WA?
Yeah.
In the school team or the school state or the under-19s?
School state.
Amazing.
Yeah. I played every school state every year I got selected, and then even out of school I was like under 23s. And my dream was to become an AFL player, but at that time the dream of that wasn't
an option.
Yeah, it wasn't an option. Couldn't do it. And then
have you thought about going back to it?
Everyone says this. I mean, there's part of me that just like wants to, like that really, really wants to.
I want Hawthorn to sign you. Like,
well, I'll tell you a bit of story. So yeah, throughout when I was like, fast forward, but 19, I actually went and applied for the Collingwood VFL team. And at the same time I was playing rugby, and this is just before Bachelor actually. And I went and played. I didn't have much money. I bought my little red-eye ticket. I got over from left at 11:55 Perth, got in at 6 a.m. and the tryouts were at 9 a.m. So I had barely any sleep. And the whole day I tried out and slept on my uncle's couch who lives in Melbourne. And then I went to slept on the couch, went to the tryouts, and then that was on a Saturday, that weekend, did a whole week. And then the next Saturday I played rugby and I broke my collarbone. And then the Monday following they called me to let me know that I got into the team. So this was my opportunity to come to Melbourne and play in the VFL team, and I was so excited. And then I had to let them know that I'd just snapped my collarbone in half. And I know, but in hindsight, I think it was I was playing rugby and footy every weekend back to back. I was yeah. Anyways, I then went on a massive holiday, quit my job, went on a massive holiday, and then went on The Bachelor.
So life took a pretty...
went a very unusual way, but
and here we are.
It was such a weird thing when I
just a classic journey.
Yeah, just every day.
I'm really struck by what you do now for a job and the role that Jeremy Bruce played in your life, and I'm struck by the power of that an adult can have over a younger person's life. And was it conscious that the role model that he or others played, maybe there are other people that led you to go into youth work, or and then how do you? I don't know. I don't know what the question is. I'm just so in awe of what you do, and I'm really, really emotional thinking about the power that a good role model can have on a child.
Role modeling is so important. And I also had another teacher called Joe who came into my life later. So, the years that I was mute were probably more the year 7, year 8, going into year 9, where it's a hard year for kids that age, because so much is happening, puberty is starting, and they're, learning so much more about themselves. And I think when I started to come out of my shell, I wasn't maybe the best at knowing how to express myself, because I'd sort of gone so inward. Then I started
it all came out at once. Sort of
a little bit. And I wasn't rebellious. I was just a bit, I think I was kind of maybe angry a little bit.
I think that sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah. And luckily for me, I had outlets like footy and athletics that I could express that. But then, at 15, because I wasn't so good at, communicating that, and I wasn't so self-reflective, the people close to me were the people that were getting it probably the most. And I was talking about my relationship with my stepmom, being a little bit toxic at times. And I was living with her still at that time, but decided, you know what, I'm going to move out and live by myself. I was like, screw this, I'm out. And so I went and lived with my friends. And it's not as easy as that, people. Basically, I packed up the one bag that I had and moved out of home. And if it wasn't for this one teacher, Joe, who knows also where I could have been, because I was living on my friend's couch. I wasn't going to school. My attendance went from being 100% then down to really low. And she was like, well, this is so out of character for Brooke. What's the go? Yeah. And she found me, and she, basically came to my best friend's house, and she was like, you're coming to live with me. That's it. She was like, no. And I was a good kid. I wasn't the smartest because I had missed out on so much school when I was younger, having to stay home and basically look after my siblings. So I had to do so much catching up. And luckily for me, I was shy, and so I didn't have friends. I wasn't distracted. I'd focused on my schoolwork. I'd caught up. So she was like, well, I'm not letting you fail. This you're going to do year 11 and 12. You're graduating.
Oh, wow.
And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have graduated. I probably wouldn't have gone to uni. again, another teacher who'd stepped in and sort of helped me navigate my path. And, you know, we're all still really good friends now. Like they were surprised that I would go on a show like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, but they were really hopeful and really excited about it. But yeah, I mean, Jo is an amazing human being. She dedicated her whole life to education. Just she doesn't have children. And she's just the kindest, most warm soul you can ever imagine. And my principal at the time, because he had to also pass the fact that, you know, I was living with a teacher. It's very conflicting. I think it's very unheard of in the department to do that. So he also then had to know the situation at home, and he had to know my history, which he already sort of did. And, you know, I graduated as head girl of the school.
Wow.
Really unusual.
God.
And I gave this speech to my principal, who was leaving the same year that I graduated, which made him so emotional and cry. And it's one of the most like things that I will take, like, you know, not for granted ever, is that, you know, when he did his speech, he like, you know, thanked the students, but he like personally thanked me, because it wasn't like for students like me that made him come into work every day.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, it's not like people like you that I came to school, you know. And I had this like relationship with my teachers more than I did with students, really. Like I have good friends, but I wouldn't say that I'm like really good friends with people that I went to school with. I was just always like, you know, hanging out with the teachers, hanging out in the, you know, tutor room by myself. And then I just played sport. Like that was a little roamer, I'd say, like a little roamer, like roaming around and making sure everyone else is good. And I sort of built my confidence to that. And maybe it was like a part of me that was like a bit of a facade, like as in like, you know, because I came out of like being mute and not talking for a little bit to then having to like talk at every assembly and introduce students and staff. But I was like, well, if I'm going to throw myself into this, like, you know, I've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it was so weird. And I'd made that decision. But the weird thing is Jo tells me now that in year 8, even though when I was in this mute stage, she was like, you wrote on a thing one day that you were like, I'm going to graduate as head girl, like from year 8. And then, like every year I just joined the student council, and year 12 I graduated as head girl. I was like 3 points off the duck, so I was like, damn it. That would have been a double whammy.
Jesus.
Jeez.
But it was a very low socioeconomic school, so not that it downplays it, but
No, you were downplaying it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you really
worked.
shouldn't.
I worked hard. I've always just had this drive from like this moment. Like I was like, once I found my little voice, I was like, you know what? This is a fresh start. Like this is a new start for me. Yeah, weird. Anyways.
Not weird. Wow.
I just like we've been doing this podcast for like 5 years, and I just have to tell you that and not that it's competition, but you're about to win something.
Yes.
I just have never felt so moved. I just feel so sad for that young Brooke, you know. And I just think you're incredible.
Thank you. I mean, I feel sad for her sometimes as well, but without her, I don't think I could do what I do. And it's sometimes like so emotional because I work in youth work. I have done for the last 10 years. I see like 10 of those 11-year-old girls and I think, holy shit, like they're going to have such a wonderful life, you know, because I'm not going to let them not have a wonderful life.
Well, they're so lucky to have you with your
I'm
experience
lucky.
and I mean, incredible.
Did you say you're lucky?
Yeah, I said I'm lucky.
Wow.
I don't consider myself like a person that's always had, you know, luck. Like,
Yeah.
but, you know, I think whatever happens, in an experience, like you can never let it define you, or you can choose, a different path. And I always say to myself that in that time, back to that young girl, is I only did the best that I could with what I had. And that's enough. Like that was more than enough. Like I can't, like I said, I wouldn't change any of those experiences, even the really, really fucked up ones. Sorry, excuse my language, but
That's all right. I think we're past kerfuffles now.
Yeah.
this is now not a PG podcast, Emery.
Sometimes I meet people and I hear about their story and I feel a little bit silly that I'm
No.
the resilience guy. I met you. I would like you to have the resilience project. You can. It's yours. It's yours. Like
It's a pretty good offer. It's going really well. I'd seriously consider that.
No, there's actually been many of times where I've drafted an email to send to you, Hugh.
oh,
Yeah, I've just never sent. Not because I was looking for anything or, wanting advice in any way. It was actually just wanting to tell you how amazing and how important it is to talk about resilience and understand it. And I think, one of your other values is gratitude. And I think for me, I've always been really grateful. Like even in the shitstorm of life, I'm always like, oh, I've got a roof over my head, I've got food in my cupboard, I'm good. Like, I've always just like reminded myself that, like, take what you've got. And I'm always just like really grateful. It's just crazy that I live in these very conflicting worlds with the show, and, people know me off the show and this is the life that I've lived. It's like, well, you're never going to be able to prove to anyone who you are in a split second. But yeah, anyways, I've written so many messages, I think, to you being like, it's like, I learned so much on this. And yeah, I really should have sent Sam. I think I lacked the confidence to do that back in the day. But
well, it's so lovely.
Yeah.
But I love that we've all met like this and we've heard your story like this because
thank you.
I would have appreciated it. But this is like hearing a story like this and knowing you properly as a person now. It's
I think timing is always like a consideration. Like I think people come into your life for different reasons, and I think I've always trusted the timing and guidance. I'm not like woo woo, like witchy woo, but like
Witchy woo.
People like I believe in the universe.
No, you don't strike me as witchy woo.
No, I'm actually I believe in the power of my ancestors, and I think if I need guidance, like get that guidance and I ask them directly, and hopefully they sort of put me on this path. I think I'm just also a very optimistic and quite a hopeful person that there's not a solution, if that makes sense. Like I'm like even if it's just like sitting with it for a bit, I'm just like, it's gonna pass, like it's fine. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people right now will be just like desperately searching for more Brooke. Where do we find
just
more Brooke?
Googling more Blurton.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a podcast. It's called Not So PG. It's with Nova, and my host is one of my best friends, Maddie Mills. But I do also have a book called Big Love, which you can find, I think, at most any bookstore. But also I do have an audio version if you don't read. And you can find that on Audible, obviously, as well.
And that book, I'm guessing it's a lot of what we've spoken about today, and I'm guessing the Bachelor stuff is probably a very small percentage of what the book's about. Yeah,
it's more about, I guess, the book is called Big Love. It's ironic because obviously I'm not big, I'm quite small, but the love aspect isn't just about the love aspect on the shows. It's more about the, transformative power of love and finding love within yourself, your culture, your country, and sort of how I found love throughout my whole life. So, yeah.
Well, we'll link to your book and audiobook and anything else we can find in the show notes.
Thanks, guys.
And the TED Talk as well
it.
was amazing.
Yeah.
So your TED Talk is incredible. Put the TED Talk in there as well.
Yeah, that's a great dating prompt, by the way.
The TED Talk.
Yeah, if you put it on your welcome to my TED Talk, and it's a photo because I actually did one.
Right, that's good.
Sorry, I just thought that's a joke. That's a silly joke. On the jokes.
Well, I think, Ryan, you so beautifully put it before, the sadness that you felt for your 11-year-old Brooke. I think I speak on behalf of every single person listening to this, that we feel an equal amount of pride and awe and admiration for the adult version of Brooke that's just in front of us speaking to us today. We love you, and it's been such a privilege and honour to listen to you speak today.
Oh,
So thank you.
thank you, Thuri. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thanks, guys.